This is the Real Footy Podcast. Coming up, Tom Lynch is in hot water for a wild incident at the MCG on Sunday. Collingwood keep on winning and winning ugly. And after a 5-round marathon, we mercifully say bye-bye to the bye.
This was after the contest, and there's the swinging arm from Lynch. So that was the reportable offence.
McGovern's got it in the pocket, plenty of time to wind up, and he's kicked the middle of the footy. He was lining up for the right foot, and he kicked the guts of the pill.
Wait and get it back to Vandermeer so he can use his pace. He spins away from Roberts. Clever hand pass. Fraser again, perhaps. He's got 2. He's got 3. Soak it up, son. You are having a blinder.
Well, hello and welcome. My name is Michael Gleeson, and joining me today, Caroline Wilson and Jake Knoll. Welcome to you both.
Hello, Michael. You'll be happy because no more bye rounds for the year.
Oh, thank God
except for the
that.
end of season.
Thank God for that. And we go straight into this week when no top 8 team plays another top 8 team. So a crackerjack round ahead of us too. But yeah, the
top 9 plays the bottom 9. In fact,
another way of looking at it. Yes.
Well, we probably should start, though, with Tom Lynch, who you wrote about in your 4 points column this week.
I think everyone is going to have a little nibble at talking about Tom Lynch this week. And it was a bit, it was like retro round or something, wasn't it? It didn't feel like something you see in the modern, mercifully, don't see in the modern game. But he just looked cranky. He played cranky. He couldn't go, didn't like the blocking and the tagging and the niggling, and tried to use that as the reason for lashing out.
I thought, Jake, this has been coming all season, and he's already been suspended this year. He's had a couple of lash outs this year. He's given away free kicks too often. Luke Hodge defended him last week with me on Channel 7 and said, "Oh no, this is what you want to a degree. It's not what you want."
Well, you don't want him in the grandstand. I mean, and you want him getting the ball.
So, you also don't want him punching someone in the head.
No, that's right.
It's terrible.
It's lucky that it didn't really connect. So, yeah, look, it's not good leadership. It's poor by Tom. He's a fine person. So it's always struck me that some of the things that he does on the field are at odds with his character off the field. That's my experience of Tom Lynch.
Which Michael wrote about in his column. But, I mean, it's so disappointing that the coach wasn't prepared to say anything too.
Well, I think what happens, though, in fairness to Uze, you don't tend to comment on when it hasn't yet come out at the tribunal. Now, if he gets 4 weeks, not 3, that has a material effect on. There might be a game in that. I haven't looked at the fixture ahead. Richmond are not going to win. They might win another game. They would be hoping to win another couple of games, and I think that him
certainly not
there,
against Geelong next week.
No, not against Geelong. But
Jake, he doesn't have to make excuses for him. I mean, he could say, "Look, I'm not going to talk about it because it's going before it's the judiciary." There's no need to sort of stick up for him and say, "Well, look, he might have been frustrated
at the time,
by."
He had no kicks, no marks, no handballs to half time, and then gave away 5 free kicks. So, on the basis of that, I don't think he's going to be a great loss if that's the level of performance that he's putting out there. So, I think that also illustrates why he was frustrated. He couldn't get near the ball, and all he kept doing was giving away frees. And he's playing like an angry old man that can't cope with the physical limitations on him and the reduced side that he's playing in now.
And he took the decision. I mean, Brisbane spoke to him after Joe Danaher left, and he said, "No, I'm seeing out my contract with this mob," and he probably, didn't want to move again. And
still.
Decent contract. Richmond, brought him down from the Gold Coast. He played in 2 premierships.
When you say decent contract, let's be specific here. His first 3 years of a 7-year deal were not much more than $500,000 a year, and he was being paid
back-ended.
Very heavily back-ended. He's one of the highest paid players in the comp. Over those last 4 years, it's well over $1 million each year. So there's double incentive, Caro, not to go to entertain offers anywhere else.
Look, he did the right thing, but in a week where McKelty-Lafau goes down, so key position players are going to be an issue in the next few weeks, and that's really disappointing too. I understand that no one expected much from the Tigers this year, and earlier in the year they were overachieving, and the young guys were looking, like everything that they promised.
Often happens with young players.
They get tired in the second half of the season.
I don't think he was thinking of McKelty Lafau when he swung his fist. I think he's just thinking, this is madly frustrated.
Of course,
it's got to go straight to the tribunal.
But that's not good. He's got to show more leadership than that.
Yeah. No, he would agree with everything about that, and he'd be sitting here in the cold light of day, just throwing his hands up, saying, "I don't know what I was thinking." But he has been that player that doesn't, he crosses the line, and he's a different personality, and that's what made him a really good player for Richmond through that period too. Really
playing on the edge.
Edge and aggression, and the other teams knew that he was there, but he never tended to go. Well, he never did anything like this. He would occasionally transgress in getting the balance wrong with aggression, but this is beyond any of that.
Yeah, it's just been a.
Can I just sorry to jump in on this one. There's a tendency among coaches now to just defend the player and also to highlight. There's an increasing trend, I think, of highlighting if they're being grabbed or if they're being jostled or they're being tagged. There's a lot of you see that with McRae talking about Nick Dacos. You see that you're now getting more discussion about, and the tendency is very rare for the coach to in any way criticise his own player.
I thought
in the past they might say something that was a guarded criticism.
If he had his time again.
Yeah, if he had his time again. They're not even saying that. It's all back the player in, come hell or high water, I think.
Yeah. You're right. And I think to your point,
putting
Caro,
the player ahead of the game.
To your point, I think Uze would have been better off following the lead of his player, who basically came out afterwards
and apologised.
And said, I don't know what I was thinking. The idea of putting up, this is the justification for it, he was being grabbed and tagged and whatever, that's not going to work, I don't think, with the MRO or the tribunal, who are just going to look at, well, you whacked him, and if there's any way of mitigating it, it would be by being contrite as a club and as an individual. I don't think saying, but he was being grabbed is going to work at all.
It'll probably work against. And this after a saga that dogged the club for the first half of the season, which was Noah Bolter, a player who they've signed to a pretty impressive seven-year deal.
7 years.
Anyway, don't get me started. But,
We didn't. You brought it up.
the continuing defence of Bolter through everything and then playing him and...
Richmond under Hardwick as well, have they ever not defended the player irrespective of what the player's done? There's a pattern, pretty entrenched pattern. It's true of most clubs.
Back under Danny Frawley, didn't he suspend Brad Ottens and they suspended the guy on drink driving? And yeah.
No, I mean since Hardwick.
No, you're right.
Remember when Tom Lynch was criticised and Hardwick, Dimmer came out and lashed David Schwartz and said he was essentially accused him of being, in tears at a grand final. Not Damien Hardwick's best moment, I thought. Quite poor, actually.
Yeah.
Remember that?
No. Very
so
poor.
that's an example where
they were pretty harsh on Callum Coleman Jones and Sydney Stack.
Well, the AFL were whacking them over the head about that. Having been up there and spotted Gillan McLaughlin and Brendan Gale having a conversation.
I think on the walking track.
I think the more pertinent one is the Bolter one, where the first instinct of the club was to minimise his role and to say, no, and we gave him a stern penalty, it was 4 weeks, and you're like, no, that's not stern.
Is that setting standards for all these brilliant young draft picks? No, sorry, and Tom Lynch has taken it further. Anyway, disappointing. Now, I've spoke to some AFL people moving on to the bye.
Yes.
They are adamant that this is the best way of doing it.
No, well, they might be. I'm adamant it's not.
They're the ones who are going to... everyone's saying it's not.
They're also the ones that put Carlton on and Essendon on Thursday night and Friday night footy. Genius. I mean...
Well, that's got a lot to do with the fact that Fox Footy are paying the lion's share of the media deal and they're getting a lot of really good games. Thursday nights have been pretty putrid. Yeah. In fact, Friday nights have been okay, and Friday night last week was a brilliant game. Well, but
it feels like it then means like Sundays are now like there's 2 games on, and it's almost neglected now.
I think the view of the executive is that supporters essentially want to know that every Thursday night and every Friday night and every Saturday night they can turn on their TV and get a game, and at least 2 games on Sunday. So they would rather that than going through one weekend of pain, which is what you're suggesting, and I agree with you.
They might think that, but fans aren't. They might think that right now. You keep tossing up dross on a Thursday night, that's not going to keep the fans engaged.
Yep.
You've got to. It's not just putting it on. It's putting on something that you want to watch. And I feel like a quarter of the season they take the air out of things by just taking away the game. There's no momentum, and even throughout a weekend of bang bang, you're bouncing between games, and it gives that greater vibrancy to the season that I think it lacks, and it's lacked for the last. I know the 5-week thing. I know the one whole weekend off wasn't great, and it was, even if you had the 2 games on, or if you had ideally you would have an AFLW State of Origin or something like that. But that's not feasible given the way the season sits now. But to me, it just doesn't feel right.
An AFLW game could work because they're in full training.
Yeah.
So maybe that could work. It's no, look, it hasn't been enjoyable, and there haven't been. I don't feel, Jake, there've been as many good games this year. Is that a bit of an over?
No, I think what happened. Kind of. I think the games were really good until about round 8 or 10, and then I think there's been a decline through that middle part of the year, which has coincided with the buys. So I think the standards of games got worse, but I think the early games, there were some really good games. Geelong involved in a hell of a lot of the good games. The Geelong-Collingwood game was an absolute corker with the Jack Crisp shot after the siren, Patrick Dangerfield. The Geelong-Bulldogs game I thought was memorable. Adelaide Crows have been involved in some really good games. I think it trailed off from about the double-figure round.
Well, it's coincided
with the buys, but that might just be who they fixed.
It's also coincided with the fact Carlton's drop-off and Essendon's injuries and their drop-away. So those two big teams... And yet they're getting the Thursday nights and Friday nights. So you've got these 2 big teams that have, for whatever reason specific to each other, fallen away, and it magnifies a problem because you've got these 2 teams that are dominating these marquee slots that are unable to be competitive like the way they were at the start of the year even. Well, Essendon has struggled to be competitive, but, they're...
Extraordinary that Essendon, for the second bye in a row, have sustained 3 injuries.
Managed to get injured when not playing.
Yeah, as rusted on Essendon supporter I work with said, we're the only side who's lost to the bye twice in 1 year. Just extraordinary. Yeah, anyway.
Jake, the Blues, we can't go a week without another instalment.
Yep.
This seemed to be...
Singing the Blues.
Yeah. I'm not sure it was worse than the week before, but it was certainly no better.
No, it was worse. This was on what I saw, with the only factor that their team was, in real terms, depleted. That if you look at the Fab Five, as I would call them, the Curnow, Mackay, Walsh, Wiedering, and Cripps, 2 of them are not playing in Walsh and Mackay, and have had injury and, in Mackay's case,
personal
issues. And then and they're both not playing. Then you've got Cripps and Wiedering were both took the field, but Cripps had an illness during the week. I saw him interviewed after the game by Mitch Cleary, and there was a sort of suggestion, well, I wasn't feeling so well the day before, but I was okay. He fended it off, as he does. In the piece I wrote, I compared him, he's a bit like the Black Knight in Monty Python. He's always sort of fronting up with
just a flesh wound.
Yeah, just a flesh wound for Patrick Cripps. Then,
you were quite savage on the leaders, though.
Yeah, savage would be... I think I was hard on them. I think that I felt that they
You put them way ahead of the coach.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think at this hour of need, if they were not right to play, don't play, because I reckon the narrative went heavily against Voss as a result of that performance. So what happens if those 2 guys didn't play? If Wiedering and Cripps didn't play, then we would be saying, well, they're without 4 of their best 5 players. Everyone would be looking at that game going, well, they're going to get smashed. Whereas that's not what happened. I think there was an expectation, certainly I had, that they would rise and that they would play better, even on a 5-day break. Port had a 5-day break. So I thought Voss handled himself very well after the game. The only thing I felt was a bit off-key was discussion of statistics, how we're going well in these numbers. Well...
Don't sell that.
That's like expected score. If there's a myth in football, expected score. There is the score,
Yeah.
Expected score is not the score.
The one that interests me as well, though, is Curnow, because on the same basis, like three surgeries in the off-season, staggered through the off-season. So it wasn't like go in, have 3 procedures and then you're clear. They just kept coming. So he had a shocking pre-season. The last one only weeks out from the first round, misses the game. So the question with him would be, would they have been, and now, I mean, it's academic now, but would they have been better to have just sandbagged him for 6-8 weeks? A bit like, Collingwood's now got Degoe, where they basically go away, get the injury right, then do a mini pre-season and come back in so you're fit. Yeah. The query would be now.
Well, it feels like
Curnow now it would have been easy to say that.
Look at the number of issues. Caro, you highlighted some of this on your show on 7. I think Luke Sayers stepping down during the year with the scandal, the knee injury to Jagger Smith, Curnow's surgeries pre-season, the Harry Mackay having to go away, obviously all of the talk about Voss.
The move to get Mike Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, there's just so many.
Come on as chairman, and clearly not all the board was behind Rob Priestley.
Plus, you've also got the transition between Brian Cook and Graham Wright, where, I don't know, I mean, clearly those two guys seem to work it quite well, where it looks like Graham Wright moving into football as Brian looks after some of the other areas. But it's like they're chasing the year, is how it feels, and they've lost. The year is an absolute debacle.
And the big one, Jake, the big one was round 1. It's the upset of the year at the time. I mean, and you could still say it was the biggest shock result I've seen pretty much for the whole year. I mean, they were 42 points up against a team people said won't win a game. Somehow they lost.
Yeah.
That was amazing.
That was not.
You never. How do you recover from that?
Well, you can, and they had when they beat Geelong. There was a period only 5 weeks ago or 6 or 7 weeks ago when they beat the Cats, and you're thinking, okay, they can make the finals, they can make a charge, and it's just things have gone wrong. That was when Walsh and Mackay. Remember that game? Walsh and Mackay were outstanding in that game. They're not there. They depend so much on that small group of players. And then of course there's the fans, and we would be remiss not to mention the graffiti at the ground, which was deplorable. It reminded me, Caro, I don't know if both of you, your mind cast back to the manure dumping at Punt Road back in the Danny Frawley.
Everyone's mind cast back to that.
And just sort of that there's a big challenge at Carlton with fan management, not just Bruce Matheson saying things, but he's a fan, but he just happens to contribute money to the club. But the fan base, it's well and truly become in people's minds the most volatile supporter base in the comp.
They're behaving a bit like Tom Lynch. They're frustrated and lashing out.
Well, what do you think?
Well, I mean, this has been. We actually on 3AW on Saturday tried to get Ian Collins to come on because he was the new president when the rot first set in with the salary cap scandal. And Dennis Pagan coming in as coach. Colo hadn't appointed him, John Elliott had. And, I remember you and I talking to Gerard Healy at the time saying this is a 2-decade debacle, the loss of these. And I can't remember what you thought. I said, come on.
I thought 10 years.
Yeah. Well, it's been a quarter of a century.
Yeah.
And this is so many different people have come in.
Yeah.
No coach has been given enough time. Really, not one of them over that whole period has been given enough time.
Well, that's what Stephen Trigg told me, and on the record in the pre-season, he also said that he felt the salary cap penalties of 2002 at the end of that year had been a crutch, even when he was there. That's not that many years ago. He felt they were still blaming it.
Well, they either weren't given the time or they were just the wrong choices. Like they just chose the wrong people and then had to get themselves out of it. I'm
not sure Brett Ratton really had to go when he went.
No.
And I think even Greg Swan, who sacked him, would maybe rethink that now. He was only sacked because Mick Malthouse was available, and Mick Malthouse was finished really as a coach, as we found out. As good as he'd been before.
There's a tendency too that there's been a really troubling thing at Carlton that people who've thrived in other environments, and that includes Pagan and Malthouse, it includes Greg Swan. There's been a lot of people who've gone to Carlton and their reputations have been dented by their time at Carlton, or their careers even finished.
How many footy bosses? How many CEOs?
Yep.
It's just extraordinary.
Yep.
It's a career killer.
Yeah, well, I know that, I'm pretty sure that Alistair Clarkson didn't have a high opinion of Carlton, and when he was sounded out by Luke Sayers, I wasn't at all surprised.
Well, he's very excited with Brendan Bolton.
Very tight with Brendan Bolton. I think he looked at how Carlton
treated him,
treated people.
I think fundamentally your first point is right. We will move on, but fundamentally your first point is right. If those five are all playing and playing well, Carlton's not having this season, and then do we question the coach in the same way? Now, I was talking to texting back and forth with an assistant coach that was at the game and just said, this is the worst team that's played all year, this during the game. And there was that moment with Motlop where he just refused to chase Joe Richards or couldn't or wouldn't, and from the half-back line. And it just illustrated and this is what the coach said to me, that just summed up their inability to run defensively. They've got no run. They can't go with other teams to hunt, to chase, to run like that.
Another one we forgot. They lost Newman.
Yep.
That's been a bad loss.
Yeah.
Can we move on to Collingwood briefly, who you've also written about? So This time last year, Sydney looked like unbackable flag favourites, and we know what happened. I feel the same way about Collingwood at the moment, and in Collingwood's favour that Sydney didn't have is that they play at the MCG. They'll probably barely leave it from here now till the finals, and we know they can win premierships at the MCG. They did it 2 years ago.
Yep.
So winning ugly is it just?
Yeah, I just don't think they've been. I thought that the Hawthorn game was the high water mark. I think they played really well in that game. I don't think they've played that well for the last 3 or 4 weeks. They a 1 point win on King's birthday. North, St Kilda. St Kilda played really well. West Coast also played really well. So there's credit to those teams. But when you're talking about a side and you're looking at if you're just looking at the ladder and say, gee, they're 10 points clear of the next team at the top of the ladder, that would say to you that there's this, dynamic, all-conquering, powerful team. They just don't feel that to me, because they're winning and they're finding ways to win, which is the sign of a good team, but I don't think that they're so clearly above the rest of the competition, despite that being the indication on the ladder. And look, they've got, if they keep the rest of their list fit and they get back DeGoey, Maynard, Schultz, Maynard, Schultz and Hill, who missed last week. And then you've got, Frampton misses for 4 or 5 weeks. McCreary. Yep. They've got some serious
they had six players
missing
out.
Players. Yep. So, and the other one, I just made a point about Dan Houston, which I think he's been I don't want to overstate this, that he has been a good player this year. He's been good, but he hasn't been at the level that he was at. He hasn't yet reached the same levels at Collingwood that he had at Port. I think he's been, as I say, he's been good. He was best on ground in his first game for the club, but some of his numbers are all, a bunch of his numbers are all below what they were at Port. There's a bit of an adjustment that is made to.
So is your main point, and I'd be interested in your views, Caro. Is it your main point? They're not as their position on the premiership table is not their lead over the competition in reality of what they can do on the field. Like Sydney last year, I don't know how many games clear did they finish, but by grand final day, Brisbane looked like they were going to look good.
They lost to Geelong, narrowly beat Adelaide, beat Brisbane well up there. Look, they are deservingly the top team, but I don't think that they're a 2 to 3 game, significantly wider margin.
And they've got some
tougher
games ahead compared to like Geelong, who've done most of their top 8 games.
I think they've got Adelaide, Brisbane, Hawthorn.
Yeah, they've got some tough ones coming up. And the one thing against Collingwood is that Brisbane is second on the ladder, albeit 2.5 games behind, and we know how well Brisbane can play on the MCG now.
And the Cats. The Cats have got home games to come as well. They've got a bunch of Cardinia Park games, and they've got Richmond twice, I think.
They have got Richmond twice.
Cats have got an amazing fixture, and the Western Bulldogs, who we probably should just quickly cover off on.
Yeah.
If they manage to make the top 4, they're every bit able to beat Collingwood, I reckon, the way all the players are coming good at the right time.
Yeah, I think, like we said last week, I think they've got their top end talent is as good as anyone's. They've got things in, some assets in Darcy in particular with Bont and Libba that are equal to anyone. my query with them is more on the bottom end of their list. I don't think I think it's the weakest of any of those sort of top 4 or 6 teams. I think their bottom bracket is their vulnerability, but they would be a team that no one will want to play in September.
I would have put Lockie Bramble in that bottom group, and he
had a blinder.
He had a blinder against the Swans, and Frieger, I think, is a talented player. He'd be a good player.
Seriously good player.
And they've got, I hate the term unicorn, but they've got 2 of them.
Yeah.
Which I guess if there's 2 of them, they're not really unicorns. But, that's bottom tally.
Well, no,
a 6'4" midfielder who can run, and
he's playing at his absolute best.
And a 6'11" key forward who
extraordinary.
Who can do all sorts of things.
All right, we'll take a break there. We'll come back and talk more about the Gold Coast. And the Wizard was the goal of the year.
We're online all the time. Just search Age Real Footy on Facebook or Twitter.
That might be his finest moment in the AFL, the Big Jet.
Well, he's a great athlete. We've heard about this a lot, Lynch.
Well, welcome back. It was a big win on the Gold Coast for the Suns, and it should, we say this each week, should possibly mean they make the 8.
Well, they have got a game in hand.
Yep.
Remember, they've got Essendon twice as one of those games in hand, and Essendon next week at Marvel. Then they've got Collingwood.
That's a banana peel. They should win, but it's not a certainty.
I reckon it's certain. I mean, as close as. But then they've got Collingwood, Adelaide, Brisbane. Those 3 in a row.
Yep.
That'll tell the tale. And then they've got Richmond and Carlton.
Adelade's in Adelaide, isn't it? But Collingwood's up on the Gold Coast.
Yes.
They play a lot better at home.
They do. They do, and we've seen them play well against Collingwood at home. I think, look...
I think they'll make it.
Jake said I overuse the word disgrace, but I still think if they miss the 8 now, it would be a very, very poor
disappointment
year for them. Extreme disappointment.
It was like the week before where they come out and they get this lead, and then I think they've the team and a club that's got more self-doubt than any other. They almost wait. They get giddy. They get ahead and think, oh, they're going to be coming at us now. And sure enough, GWS came back at them, and GWS played incredibly well and are a good team, and rolled over them last week at home. Melbourne, they get ahead of them, and then Melbourne came back at them. Now, this time they actually hung on, which was good. But it's sort of like until they belong, they won't feel like they belong. Until they make the finals, until they win a final, they still feel like they doubt themselves.
It must be partly cultural.
Yeah.
And there's the inconsistency from Mac Andrew and some of the behavioural stuff. I think he needs to...
Yeah, he's been carrying an injury, I think, Mac.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, I think...
He was on Melksham for a portion of that, wasn't he? Melksham having 11 shots at goal, 5-6. Great game by Melksham. Should get a contract.
Well, yes. Missed a lot of shots too, though, which were pretty consequential in the end. Noah Anderson's last quarter, that was a genuine captain's performance.
Yep.
When they really came at them, I thought, who's going to do it here? And he was the one that just steadied. And there's some moments as well from Jed Walter, and I really liked Bailey Humphrey again, even though they did sub him out in the last quarter to sort of, I think, preserve him a bit. But he felt like a player that laboured under the hype and the expectation, and even the coach talking about him being like dusty. And
there was also a bit of a milestone in this game for Gold Coast fans. There was some boos you could detect to Stephen May.
Yes.
Have they ever booed a player that left their club, which is a sign of being a proper club? You actually boo. I'm not big on booing, but it's like it means you're more tribal. You've got some tribal basis to it.
Well, and they've got
some of the Melbourne
memories. They're not just sort of turn up and have to be told, "Oh, that guy used to play with us." They, must be.
Who's that number? Melbourne.
Yeah, it wasn't a great first half for Stephen May, and it was. I think I must have just read Pete Ryan's very good column on Stephen May, which I thought was really pertinent. Just saying he needs to lift. He's had a really bad couple of weeks.
Well, there was also a hint, wasn't there, that they'd look at it. That they would look at him as if someone wants him in a trade.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
I think just coincidental that it was also, Tom Lynch the next day. And
yeah, I know. Interesting, wasn't it?
The
two captains who left. Now we've got...
It does put a line through Melbourne though, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. And there are big decisions to be made there at the end of the year. If not the coach, some big changes in footy. indignant Ben from Fremantle writes again and says, we're just not giving Freo the credit they deserve, Glees.
Well, no, we are not giving the sixth-placed team the credit they deserve. That was a good game against St Kilda. The Saints will feel a bit, not unlucky, but, I think the last bounce sort of shouldn't have been recalled, but it was a nice one for the Dockers.
Generous bounce.
Generous. It didn't go outside the circle, so you couldn't recall it, but did favour things. But look, the Josh Tracy run-down tackle of Nasiah Wanganeen-Miller was the moment of the game until Rowan Marshall sogged the goal from the ruck contest, volleying it out of the air. That was brilliant. And how does it stack up, Jake?
Well, on the I don't think it's goal of the round. I think the Wizard, Nick Watson's goal down in Launceston, out of the centre to get the possession, get it forward, get it back,
win it back again, and kick the goal. I think that was a bit like a couple of Nick Dacos's goals last year. I thought that was the goal, the one that won it,
of the round, possibly the year. Although I want to look at a few more.
It was the inventiveness I liked though out of Marshall's. Just they expect me to do this, and against Darcy, who's enormous.
Yeah.
So, but back to Ben's point. Look, Dockers are going well. They deserve the credit. They deserve to be in the 8.
But we don't trust them.
No. They're not bankable.
Not just yet.
No, see, that's where
because a good team is going to miss the 8.
Yes, you look at them and say, well, which one misses? Because I look at GWS and think they're good enough to win it,
but they're not even in the 8
moment. And may not end up in the 8.
Well, as I said, this round of matches, top 9 play the bottom 9. And Port Adelaide's probably the team you think who could cause an upset because they're so inconsistent. And when they're
got some stars.
Yeah. So, but they play Brisbane at the Gabba, so you can't see that one being the upset, can you?
No.
It is tricky. Hawthorn had a big win down in Tassie, and the Premier's talked about sort of open the window of them maybe staying in Tassie for a couple of games every year if the new team does come in.
Look, I'm probably getting on the grassy knoll a bit here, but if you were the Hawthorn Football Club, and I don't think this happened, but I would have if I was in the negotiations with the AFL about the sale of Waverley, wouldn't you be asking for something in the fixture? Like maybe a game in Tasmania?
Oh, I wouldn't have thought so. The AFL Hawthorn should be getting down on their hands and knees and thanking everyone for the sale of Waverley. That was a great deal for them.
It's a good deal for the AFL too.
Good deal for the AFL.
That amount of money for a ground with built facilities. Richmond can go there, Melbourne, if it all turns to...
Return on investment, though, for Hawthorn, to Carrie's point, $1 into, 10 to 15 million?
Yeah, I was just making the point that I reckon they'll get a game. I wouldn't...
That would be a disaster for Tasmania.
No, one game against the Devils in Launceston.
Well...
As a home game.
Yeah,
I mean, the Premier said, what did he say, 6 games beyond 2027. Well...
The Premier spoke at their last game.
If they're going to have 6 games... They're going to be 6 games in Launceston anyway, in at least the first 2 years of the new team, because the other ground won't be ready in Hobart.
Why wouldn't you let Hawthorn have one game against the Devils at Launceston as a kind of... It would get a lot of coverage and a lot of discussion.
Devils home game, yes. Hawthorn home game, no. Hawthorn, respect your supporters and come back to Melbourne. You've done very well out of Tasmania.
You're saying the devil's in the detail of the Tassie deal.
Yeah, well, I just think for a little while at least that would be... If I was Hawthorn, I'd be asking for it.
Further to Ben's point, though, and you raise this about this weekend, you look at those, the playing on the bottom 9, then you say, well, St Kilda Hawthorn is one of those games where you go...
Yep.
It's at Marvel, it's not down there. Sydney Fremantle. Sydney's back to playing good footy. Like, they've got players back now. And that's at the SCG. That's a vulnerability. That's a vulnerable game for... I'd actually think Sydney would go into that favour.
Yeah, I tipped Sydney last week, idiotically.
Yeah,
but
I tipped Carlton, so how am I going?
I saw that.
A brain fart.
You weren't the only one. People thought they'd bounce back. I mean, everyone was shocked that they were so bad. No, you're right. Actually, Sydney is probably the biggest chance of an upset of all those bottom 9 teams.
Yeah, I think so. And that is a challenge. Like, so, this is the problem of the Well, actually, the query will be, what condition will the ground be in, Caro?
Well, it'll be terrible.
Yeah.
And guess what? It'll still be played there.
Yeah.
So why they have ground inspections, I do not know.
Well, just if you're an AFL identity, just steer clear of Andreas Pagelli. He's a Bermuda Triangle for the AFL.
Was that Andrew Demetriou at the...
Yeah, remember Andrew Demetriou going to the concert? And I think you
and
got
Ron
stuck
Evans.
into it,
Ron
didn't you?
Evans.
And Ron Evans.
Yep.
They left at half-time of a preliminary final, Geelong v Brisbane at the MCG. It was a
really hurt
dreadful
you then.
night. Yeah, because they'd done a deal with Channel 10 to play Saturday night games on Channel 10 into Brisbane. So that was the deal, and part of the deal was... And the MCG needed the preliminary final. So Brisbane were dudded. And that was the end of any... Well, you could say that
was the last... That was the home ground.
They were going for their fourth premiership that year.
Yep.
And they won, but they had to then go back to Queensland and come back to... it was a shocking decision. It was his worst decision. I still remember him yelling at me over the phone, actually, after I wrote that piece. That was a terrible... And then to go to the Opera and make a joke about it.
Apparently Pacelli's really good.
He's the Enrico Palazzo of the AFL. All right, we'll take a break there, come back with quick questions.
Get access to every episode as it drops. Hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
More tackles for the Brisbane Lions. Kick inside, 50, Morris almost. McCluggage, what a rove. Bananas for goal. Oh, Huey, you are magnificent.
Welcome back. Straight into quick questions. Jake, this is one for you. Is Hugh McCluggage the most underrated player in the AFL?
I'm going to say yes. I think he's one of the very best players in the AFL. I think right at the moment he's the Brisbane Lions' best player.
Is he underrated?
Well,
Everyone
I think he is in the. I think he's not underrated by the critics. I think he's underrated by the masses. Maybe. I think I think there's a lot of McCluggage love going around now. So maybe it's a bit of a lag in time, but he is however you rate him, he is one of the. In my view, he's in the top 10 AFL players.
We always go with the underrated. We should put it on notice and ask you next week, who's the most overrated player in the AFL?
You remember for years everyone said Shane Edwards is so underrated.
Yeah.
And after about 5
so many
years,
times.
it's like, he's not underrated.
we keep rating him every week. They didn't play this weekend, and you touched on this earlier in your miserable household that it was for the weekend, Caro, but Essendon managed to get injuries while not playing. As you said, only tend to lose the bye. Do they need the football equivalent of a Royal Commission, a review? Do they need a review at Tullamarine?
I asked Brad Scott about this earlier in the year, and he bristled at the suggestion that it had anything to do with the surface at the hangar. I think there's been a high performance team in at Essendon since 2019. I don't think they're going to be. I don't think their high performance group will be there next year, and I think the club's already looking toward a change there. And I think in the end someone's going to pay the price, and that's who it's going to be.
Well, yeah.
Too many soft tissue injuries, Jake.
I mean, people laughed when they saw it, but it's not funny for the players, is it?
Oh, it's terrible. And
no.
And and look, there've been ACLs, there've been other injuries that you can't do much about, but too many soft tissues.
Okay. Finally, is Carlton Collingwood worthy of Friday night spotlight given the Blues' form, or is it now more worthy than ever because of their form?
I think this is going to be
torture.
Yeah, well, you would think they would be more competitive, a lot more competitive this week, particularly with the two leaders, with Cripps and Curnow having an 8-day break. I think that they'll rise in intensity. A dewy night would be good for them too, a nice scrap around the ball with the big bodies. If it gets out into the open space, they're in a lot of trouble though.
Yeah. Well, there'll still be 85,000 odd people there, and
a lot of them wearing black and white, I think.
A lot of them watching TV. Well, thanks for that. That is all we have time for this week. Thanks, Caro and Jake, for joining us. And thanks also to Channel 7 and Fox Footy for the audio we've used in this episode. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can do so via email, realfootypod@theage.com.au. And don't forget to subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. The Tipping Podcast will be back on Thursday to discuss Jake's tip of Carlton. Catch you then.